Content warning. This episode includes depictions of violence, including murder. Listener discretion is advised. Sitting alone in an old trolley car, Cameron stares into his empty glass, contemplating. On the table in front of him is his notebook. Like his glass, it too is empty. He was hoping by now that it would be full of ideas for a new story to write, but it's 1:45 and he has nothing to show for it but a few pencil scratches. When he first moved to LA, Cameron figured that living just a few blocks from Hollywood Boulevard would put him on the fast track to breaking into the industry. He had been writing movies practically his whole life, and after making a few small films back in Oregon, he decided it was time to pursue his dreams as a screenwriter. Unfortunately, between the traffic, the tourists, the constant hustle to make ends meet, it wasn't exactly the dream he imagined. Thankfully, one place kept his spirits from getting too down: the Formosa Cafe. Between the celebrity headshots lining the dark walls, the vintage Pacific Electric Red Line trolley converted into an intimate dining space, and the unmissable neon sign lit up on the front of the building, the Formosa emanates the sort of golden age charm that attracted him to the movie biz in the first place. Cameron comes in for a drink or two when he's looking for inspiration. Unfortunately, tonight, all he's finding is the bottom of a glass. Cameron decides one more drink couldn't hurt. He stands and walks towards the bar, flagging down the bartender for a last call. The bartender turns his back to him to make the drink, and Cameron catches his own reflection in the mirror. He looks tired. He rubs his eyes and looks again. In the mirror, he sees a man sitting in the curved booth behind him. The man is alone, dressed to the nines, and staring straight at him. Cameron turns around to get a better look, but when he does, the booth is empty. But he could have sworn a clink behind him. He turns back around to find his fresh drink sitting on the bar in front of him, along with his tab. He signs, thanks the bartender, and takes one more look at the empty booth before heading back to the table. A few minutes later, Cameron's glass is once again empty, and he decides to hit the little boy's room before heading out. He stands and once more sees the man at the booth in the corner. He catches the man's eye. Is he looking at him? Cameron averts his gaze, but he can't help himself. He looks back. The man hasn't looked away. He nods. Cameron awkwardly nods back and makes his way to the bathroom. After finishing his business, Cameron heads back to his table to grab his jacket and notebook. He takes one last look for the man at the booth, but there's no one aside from a few of the typical tourist stragglers. He walks over to the bar where the bartender is closing up for the night. "Hey, do you know who that guy was at the booth in the corner?" "What guy?" asked the bartender, only half paying attention. "The guy dressed like he's in a Scorsese film, sitting in that big booth over there. Was he an actor or something?" The bartender looks up at him. "You mean Bugsy Siegel's booth? That's been empty all night." Cameron thanks the bartender before making his way out the door. But he's not going home, not yet. He's got to find some coffee. He's got a killer idea for a story.
Hi, I'm Bianca Lopez, and I'd like to tell you a ghost story. But not just any story. Our ghosts don't haunt desolate farmhouses, suburban attics, or castles on the Scottish moor. The spirits in these stories are the larger-than-life characters of Tinseltown's past. Whether a big-time producer, a rising starlet, or just another face in the crowd, these souls and their search for glory came to an inglorious and sometimes tragic end. So come with us as we peek behind the curtain of Hollywood's glitz and glamour and go beyond the veil on this week's Tinseltown Ghost Stories.
Tucked between modern high-rise apartments and an outdoor shopping mall, the century-old Formosa Cafe sticks out like a sore thumb. A stout crimson-red building fronted by an entryway adorned with lush tropical greenery, the restaurant and bar at the corner of busy Santa Monica Boulevard and Formosa Ave stands as a testament to the way nightlife used to look in the City of Angels. Even if you've never been inside, there's a good chance you've seen what it looks like. Only a few blocks south of Hollywood, the Formosa has had a lengthy film career, making cameos in movies like Swingers, LA Confidential, and Beverly Hills Cop 2. It often plays itself, which is not that surprising considering how integral the intimate dining space has been to so much of Tinseltown's history. Deals made in these booths range from major studios wooing A-list stars to hush-hush bargains involving all sorts of illicit behavior. Much like the personal lives of its clientele, the truth of the restaurant's first few years is shrouded in mystery. The official story is that it was opened by a boxer named Jimmy Bernstein. According to legend, around 1925, Jimmy had fixed up an out-of-commission Red Line trolley car, similar to the ones running throughout Los Angeles at the time, back when LA had world-class public transit. He converted it into a small diner near the United Artists lot, and by the 1940s found his bustling business in need of an expansion. That's when he partnered with Lem Kwan, a Hong Kong-born chef whose dishes became a can't-miss meal for Hollywood's elite. Together, the pair operated the business until Bernstein died in 1976. That's when Kwan took over and made the Formosa a family-owned business for 3 generations. That's the story, anyway. After several years of declining revenue and misguided renovations caused its star to dim, it was sold by Kwan's grandson in 2016. Determined to restore the legendary location back to its original charm, the new owners commissioned a detailed history of the building to ensure the renovations reflected the true story of the restaurant. What they found was astonishing. Rather than getting its start as a streetcar eatery owned by a boxer, it turns out the building began as a small food joint called the Red Post Cafe, opened by a steakhouse proprietor named Joe Levy. While it did open in the 20s, there was no boxer involved and no streetcar attached. The Red Post Cafe was eventually sold in 1939 to prolific nightclub owner Max Goldie, which honestly is the perfect name for a guy who owns a bunch of nightclubs. Max expanded the compact joint to a full-scale restaurant and lounge, attaching the trolley car to the building as part of his renovation. No longer the Red Post, the building was reopened as the Formosa nightclub, and business took off from there. Unfortunately, the nightclub business also drew its share of shady characters, and Goldie spent most of his time at his club on edge. He was a nervous man at the best of times, and with mobsters, cops, and the richest people in town all in business with Goldie, he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. Eventually, he got on the wrong side of the wrong people and found himself shot to death in a phone booth in 1947. That's when the Formosa was taken over by a bookie named Jimmy Bernstein, not to be confused with a boxer by the same name. Still with us? At this point, Jimmy brought in Lem Kwan, and the official story merges with the one long buried in the past. Regardless of the official story, one thing that no one questions is the popularity of the Formosa itself. The building has seen decades worth of movie stars, rockers, and celebrities pass through its doors, looking for an after-work cocktail or the latest creation from its celebrated chef. With such a prime location, it's not surprising that it turned into the local watering hole for some of Tinseltown's biggest names. Everyone from Marilyn Monroe to Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra took an after-work drink inside its trolley car. But one other man would also make it his favorite haunt. A man whose long list of crimes and killings is so evil that maybe even hell doesn't want him there. A man who, some say, now lingers in the afterlife, still looking to make one last backroom deal. And if there's some violence involved, even better. A man who would come to be known as Bugsy Siegel, one of the most notorious gangsters in all of Hollywood history. Life didn't start out easy for him, and that made him furious. Born in Brooklyn in 1906 to Russian Jewish parents who had immigrated from Eastern Europe to find a better life in America, Benjamin Siegelbaum instead found the poverty of his Williamsburg neighborhood to be an utter disappointment. Although his parents were willing to do backbreaking work for little pay while their 5 kids were at school, young Benjamin made a different choice, skipping classes and spending his days picking pockets and stealing coins, like a New York Artful Dodger. By 14, he had formed his first gang, working to extort neighborhood peddlers for protection cash. Specifically, it was protection from the young gang setting their carts on fire, which they would if any peddler refused to pay. The life of crime meant making a name for himself, and Benjamin Siegelbaum's gang took that literally when they gave him a moniker that would stick with him the rest of his life: Bugsy Siegel. Bugsy came from the then popular phrase, crazy as a bug. Think of it like, watch out, that guy's kinda Bugsy. And it absolutely fit the man. You see, Bugsy had a reputation for flying off the handle at the smallest insult. When he did, he had a penchant for violence, even for an upstart young gangster. While the name would eventually cause anyone in his way to tremble, Bugsy wasn't exactly thrilled about it. Maybe that was because it reminded him that he was poor, or no more than a bug. Bugsy would spend his life and the fortune he would make proving them wrong. Before long, Bugsy's reputation drew the attention of another teenage gangster, an unassuming young man named Meyer Lansky. Lansky would go on to be one of the central figures responsible for crime organizing in the United States. But before all that, when Prohibition became the law of the land and pushed a previously legal business underground, he was another forgotten kid living on the edge of society. Siegel and Lansky would cross paths as neighbors, but it wasn't long before the youths formed their own small organization, called the Bugs and Meyer Mob. The pair soon became feared bootleggers operating in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, running booze through the ports, paying off small-time cops and local officials, and using violence when necessary. And they often found it necessary. Whereas Lansky offered a soft, even-tempered approach to his dealings before he cut your throat, Siegel was the hot-headed mafia type who shot first and asked questions never. The balance they were able to achieve together became incredibly profitable for the pair, and the two had no trouble turning their regular brains and brawn operation into big business. As their gang continued to grow in reputation, the 2 Jewish kids from Brooklyn began working with the various Italian crime families. Lansky would outsource their skills in hijacking and drug running, while Siegel would be the trigger man for whichever gang required his service. It was a good, racket for the two as they entered their 20s. But as the death toll rose, so did the competition between rival gangs. In 1931, Charles Lucky Luciano, the so-called father of organized crime, consolidated the gangs, that is, killed off all his rivals, and took over the city of New York, thanks in no small part to his associates, Bugsy Siegel and Meyer Lansky. The Bugs and Meyer mob was pulled fully into Luciano's group, and the National Crime Syndicate was born. With Lansky taking on a more direct role in syndicate operations, Siegel turned his attention to the thing he liked best: violence. He formed an internal group, a subsidiary for you corporate types, which was responsible for enforcing the will of the mafia and its boss. This group was called Murder Incorporated, and you can guess that the name wasn't just for show. If anyone stepped out of line, be it a speakeasy owner who was behind on his loan payments, or a small-time crook moving in on their space, Bugsy and his Murder Inc. crew provided the solution to the syndicate's problems. By some accounts, Siegel's enforcement included personally offing over 30 people and arranging or otherwise facilitating dozens more hits. That doesn't include the hundreds of other violent crimes Bugsy committed for his work and his wealth. With the syndicate having a chokehold on the nation's criminal enterprise, the money continued to pour in, and Bugsy wasn't afraid to flaunt it. From his apartment in the Waldorf Astoria to becoming a regular feature of Manhattan nightlife, Bugsy lived large in the Big Apple. In 1929, he married his childhood sweetheart, Esta Krakauer, and had 2 girls, Millicent and Barbara. But Bugsy wasn't one to put limits on his actions, and that extended to his reputation as a ladies' man. Eventually, all the carnage and rash decision-making caught up to Bugsy. The police were getting tired of looking the other way, and after killing enough other bad guys, a number of contracts were taken out on his life. His quick temper and short-sighted nature also ruffled plenty of feathers inside the syndicate, and it could have been curtains for old Bugsy. But rather than send him up the river or down to sleep with the fishes, Luciano and Lansky saw this as a perfect opportunity to expand their base of operations out west. So in 1937, the syndicate sent Siegel to Los Angeles to oversee the mob's burgeoning wire and gambling racket. As it would turn out, Hollywood was exactly the sort of action Bugsy was looking for. What is it about Tinseltown that makes it so attractive to gangster types? Maybe it's the executives playing loose with their morals, or corrupt city officials hoping for a piece of the glamour around them. Whatever it is, no one made the transition from the mean streets of Brooklyn to the wide boulevards of Los Angeles with more flair and ease than Bugsy Siegel. As soon as he landed, Bugsy got to work establishing the syndicate's West Coast branch. From the numbers racket he set up with Al Capone's Chicago outfit to illicit gambling, prostitution, and narcotic smuggling, Siegel oversaw the whole kit and caboodle on the West Coast. This allowed Bugsy to live an outwardly extravagant lifestyle, moving his wife and kids to Beverly Hills and hitting the town. By 1942, while American soldiers died by the hundreds fighting the Axis powers, Bugsy's network was raking in around $500K a year. And with money like that, it's no surprise that Bugsy, still regularly murdering anyone in the syndicate's way, was also one of the most celebrated men in Tinseltown. In this industry, it's all about who you know, and it just so happened that while Bugsy was breaking bones in Brooklyn, his childhood friend, George Raft, had broken into the movie business as an actor. Raft had made a name for himself appearing in, what else? Gangster films in the 1930s, including Scarface and Each Dawn I Die. Thanks to Raft, Bugsy got to know the movers and shakers in entertainment. He rubbed elbows with movie stars, and they took to him like one of their own. Jean Harlow, the original blonde bombshell, even became his daughter Millicent's godmother. This party life eventually led Bugsy to the Formosa Cafe, where he got in deep with Max Goldie. Bugsy would sit at a table close to the door, watching to see which big-time celebrities he could call over and entertain. Not to mention, he could see any potential danger coming. Max eventually gave Bugsy the run of the place, and the gangster created a small kingdom of his own, treating the Formosa as his personal office, running drugs and arranging sex work from the back room of the nightclub. When business was concluded, he would then rejoin the fun and wine and dine celebrities with lurid stories from his time in New York. Of course, it's hard to make such a big impact on Hollywood without Hollywood making a big impact on you. And if there's one thing a violent womanizer like Bugsy enjoyed, it's his skincare routine. If there was a cream, hair elixir, or night guard chin strap that would keep him looking young and fresh for Hollywood's elite, Bugsy tried it. While his violence was still always there just under the surface, it was his vanity that became his calling card in Tinseltown. Bugsy wasn't interested in looking good just for himself. His womanizing ways made it out west with him. And while his wife often stayed home with the kids, Bugsy had plenty of time for nighttime dalliances with celebrities and socialites. But his favorite was a woman named Virginia Hill, who was already well-versed in the life of crime when they met back in New York. She was a cash courier for the mob. He was a down-on-his-luck hitman. A rom-com setup if I ever heard one. Bugsy and Virginia got so close that she would accompany him on trips to meet the syndicate out of town. people began referring to her as the Queen of the Mob. And considering the high-class Beverly Hills mansion the life bought her, she was all in. After the war, the entertainment industry set its sights on an oasis of sin in the desert, Las Vegas. So too did the mob, which had slowly been expanding their gambling racket to make sure a cut of the money went their way. Pretty soon, the lucrative casino industry became a financial investment, and Meyer Lansky sent his old pal Bugsy in to survey the scene and look for potential opportunities. And wouldn't you know it, Bugsy found plenty he liked. In particular, an old mainstay in the Western-style aesthetic of Old Vegas called Ciro's. It was owned by his buddy at The Hollywood Reporter, Bill Wilkerson, who was looking to renovate to compete with other popular casinos on the Vegas Strip. Much like Bugsy, Wilkerson enjoyed the indulgent lifestyle, and soon Bugsy was able to take advantage of his buddy with a series of loans. And of course, this meant the syndicate's money was involved. Pretty soon, Wilkerson was out and the entire project was being overseen by Bugsy. He also renamed it the Flamingo, a nickname his paramour Virginia Hill was known for. Unfortunately for Bugsy, his violent nature and tendency to act without thinking found its way into his management style. He made erratic and sudden design changes, micromanaged the construction team, and generally made a nuisance of himself. Construction fell behind, and the initial cost of a little over $1 million ballooned to well over $6 million. Finally, the Flamingo opened in 1947, but the reception was so poor that it immediately closed for more renovations. Bugsy finally found himself in the same place so many of his victims had before. He was on the outs with the syndicate. No longer the reliable enforcer he had been, Bugsy was now a big liability to Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. On June 20th, 1947, Bugsy was at Virginia Hill's mansion in Beverly Hills. He had been staying there on and off since his wife had divorced him a year prior and left with the kids. In the dark of night, a hail of gunfire rang out, striking Bugsy through the window of the mansion. He died there, gunned down in a haze of bullets, having never seen his killer approach. As the story goes, 3 syndicate associates walked into the Flamingo in Vegas minutes after Siegel was shot and took over the casino. However, there are also suggestions that Virginia Hill's own brother had put an end to him, furious that the mobster had dragged her into the life of crime. To this day, no one knows exactly who whacked Bugsy. But maybe there's a simpler way to find out. We could just ask him. Over the years, the Formosa Cafe has seen a lot of Hollywood's biggest names come and go, from movie stars of the 40s and 50s to rock stars of the 80s. Some of those even protested in front of the building in 1987 when it was almost torn down. In all of that, through a number of threats to its own survival, the Formosa has resisted the demands to modernize and update, looking much today as it might have back when Bugsy was living his dark dreams. But that doesn't mean the spirits of the past have stayed quiet about it. In 1999, the Formosa was undergoing one of the countless minor renovations it had over the years, this time on a back office and storeroom. It was there, hidden away in a wall, that construction workers found an old rusty safe. With a little digging and an assist from the company that made the safe, the truth was revealed. It was the exact safe that Bugsy Siegel used to house the money that changed hands during his after-hours business dealings in the back of the nightclub. After his assassination in 1947, the safe was left untouched and forgotten for over 50 years. Who knew what illicit material they would find inside? Finally, in 2000, with news cameras watching, the safe was cracked open. Inside they found nothing. The safe was completely empty. One worker said there wasn't so much as a paper clip inside. But was there something else in there? Something waiting for someone to come along and let it out? After the safe was opened, longtime staff began to witness strange sights they had never witnessed before. Locked doors unlocking themselves, opening and closing with a slam. Footsteps being heard late at night when no one else was in the building. On a personal visit I took to the restaurant, a server told me he once witnessed glasses sliding off the bar and smashing on the floor with no one near them. Some have even seen a strange man sitting at Bugsy's old booth in the reflection of the mirror behind the bar. When they turn around to catch a glimpse of whoever is there, the mysterious figure is always gone. Not exactly the sort of experience you want to have with a murderer who's been dead for 70 years. Even with all the strange goings-on, the Formosa Cafe doesn't seem to have a problem with it. In fact, it seems to invite the spectral attention. As a part of those more recent renovations by the new owners, the safe itself was installed in Siegel's favorite booth. You'll find it there in the floor, surrounded by pictures of Bugsy, and even his headshot. Probably the only one he took where nobody died. Patrons can catch their own glimpse of mobster memorabilia left behind as a reminder of the high times and low morals of Hollywood's golden age. A time when celebrities mingled with criminals over high-priced cocktails, and anything your heart desired could be bought and sold in the city's cramped back rooms.
I'm your host, Bianca Lopez. Tinseltown Ghost Stories is part of the Pod Frontier podcast network. This episode was written by Kyle F. Andrews with research assistance by Emily Castro. Produced by Kyle F. Andrews and Cameron Bile. Co-produced by Emily Castro. Sound recording, audio engineering, and mixing from Alyssa Rose at Honeydew Studios. Directed by Morgan Rudder.
Audio editing by Joseph Murphy.
Music composed by Robinson Hobbs. We'll be back next month for another new full-length episode on creepy locations and the crimes and secrets around them. Until then, stay spooky, LA.
As a filmmaker, I'm fascinated by the endless ways to tell a story in pictures, and I find my inspiration in films by great directors. Whether you're just a casual film fan or a full-fledged filmmaker yourself, the Director Series podcast will deepen your love of cinema with in-depth breakdowns of your favorite films and directors. Each month brings together a collection of films from an influential filmmaker or film movement, and explores the overlapping themes and ideas that tie them together in a bid to inspire the next generation of storytellers. Look for the Director Series podcast on your favorite podcatcher, or go to patreon.com/podfrontier to learn more.